Well, welcome, Dr. Eileen Kennedy-Moore. I'm so glad you're able to join us today in this conversation about the parent-teacher partnership as we continue through this pandemic.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Of course. And, now that we're 8 months in, I think it's apparent that we are all learning to adapt in ways we didn't think we could. And, the anxiety we're having to manage since the March announcement and schools closing and then coming back. And on top of all of that, the election and social justice issues, there's just a lot for all of us to hold, but particularly for parents. We know that children absorb anxieties that parents have, even though they might be unspoken. And so I'm so glad to have this conversation today where we can focus on the parent-school partnership and how to manage that effectively as this pandemic continues. And I want to start by asking you, how involved should parents be in their child's schooling right now, given that they had quite a change March through June in being involved in a really myopic way?
So the short answer for that is as little as possible. And I know a lot of parents are going to go, wait, because, and you've probably seen this, Michelle, the standards for what is involved in being a good parent have really expanded dramatically. So when my grandmother was raising her kids, she thought she was doing a good job if the kids were clean. And in my mother's generation, she could pat herself on the back if the kids were fairly obedient. But nowadays, parents feel this tremendous pressure to, augment their children's education, and they've got to be in charge of their athletic and artistic and spiritual and musical and everything else. And it can create a kind of an idea of, build a better boy, which is just not helpful. So really, with education, we want to do as little as possible. And the main reason for this is because we want to raise independent learning. I know that is fundamental to the Montessori values, but it's also what children really, really need. I mean, think about it. In normal times, we would drop the kid off at school, and we would have them at a school where we trust the teachers, we trust the curriculum, and that was good. But now, when our kids are home and we can watch everything that they're doing, we're like, could that be better? And we feel like we ought to be doing more. The other thing that we know from research is that when parents feel anxious, and who doesn't at this point, our instinct is to control. So there was a very interesting study where they told two groups of parents that the kids was going to do some puzzle. And one group, they said, oh, this is just a puzzle, it's just for fun, just help your kid, but it's not a big deal. The other group, they said, this puzzle is very indicative of your child's future potential or whatever. And what do you think happened with parents' behavior?
I imagine that being much like preparing them for SSATs.
Exactly. So the parents in that anxiety-inducing condition, they were just totally on top of the kids and very, very controlling. The more controlling the parents were, the less the kid enjoyed the puzzle. So we've got to step back. Another reason for this is my husband used to work at a company where he would do these big reports. And one of the reports, he had to interview HR professionals at these major corporations. And the first one he did, he came in afterwards, after the interview, and said, Eileen, you're not going to believe what the HR executive said. He said that when young adults get disappointing performance evaluations, their parents call. They call the company. Exactly, exactly. So I said, no, that's just an outlier. That doesn't. But then he interviewed other HR executives, and he would come back and said, she said the same thing, and this one did too. And one time he said this, and my daughter, my oldest daughter, was sitting in the room, and she burst out laughing because she knows that if she had had a problem at school with a teacher, I would have said, I guess you need to talk to the teacher. So, and really, this is something that we want to start even with the young kids, even with the preschoolers. Say, ask the teacher or tell the teacher. We might need to coach and encourage, but as much as possible, we want them to solve the problem. If we leap in and try to solve a problem that kids could solve on their own, we're actually stealing their opportunity to learn important coping strategies.
And what
So,
I hear you say too is it's not just, allowing the children what they need to do for independence, but it's weaning ourselves off of that need as a parent, because going cold turkey at 18 is going to leave a child who is not capable to manage in the world.
right. So often what I recommend to parents is don't correct your child's homework. So let's be very concrete on what that looks like. And this is really hard for some parents because, oh, I want to do a good job as a parent. I want to make sure my kid is doing well. But there are a lot of reasons why we want to take that step back. So first of all, it gives a really unhealthy message to kids that your work isn't good enough to be seen in public. It also interferes with communication with the teacher. How does the teacher know what your kid does or doesn't understand if you're running interference? It creates a, a kind of a confusion about whose job is it? Whose responsibility is it to do this work? Is it yours? Is it mine? It's definitely the kid's responsibility.
And I
Now,
think too, I hear from parents whose responsibility is it to hold the kids to the best they can do. And without that trust that the educators are going to hold the child to their best work, parents feel they need to step in. And that's another avenue for trouble starting.
right, and it is really important to trust the teachers and to trust the kid that they're going to learn. We also, most of us parents don't have a clear idea of what, say, an 8-year-old should be doing right now. Children are not supposed to be showing adult level productivity and motivation. But the most important reason why we really want to take a step back, and of course, we're not going to be ridiculous about it. Most children under these circumstances need their parents to provide structure. You're going to have a snack and then you're going to do homework. And if your kid comes to you with a question, of course you're going to answer it and explain it. But that's very different because the ownership is still with the child rather than the parent doing it. But I think the main reason we want to not get involved or over-involved in our kids' schoolwork is because of the risk of competitive parenting. Do you know what I'm talking about here? I think we've all seen this. You're standing around, you used to be standing around at pickup time, and you hear, oh, my kid is doing this, and oh, my kid is that. And the risk of competitive parenting is that it gives kids the message, you need to succeed to prove that I'm a good parent. What a terrible burden to put on a child. We really want to be not sculptors, but gardeners, allowing our child to flourish in their particular way. And this is a matter of trust in our kids, that we have to believe that they will grow, they will learn, they will find a path that is right for them. We want to be in the background. What's that phrase that you always use?
Yes, our phrase is the guide on the side and not the sage on the stage. In traditional educational thinking, we imagine the child coming in like an empty vessel and the teacher being the sage and pouring knowledge into the child's brain, and then the child taking a test and regurgitating that. In Montessori, we believe we are the guide on the side, preparing an environment that's just right. And it's very similar to your analogy of the gardener. So we're creating the right soil, making sure there's sunlight and watering, and we're letting each child advance on their own. So I'm really happy to hear you confirm that that is healthy for children.
It really is. You know, in my practice, I see so many kids who are incredibly anxious and perfectionistic. And I think that this is particularly a risk for very bright kids because they can come to believe that they are their performance. And that means that they're terribly vulnerable. So when they struggle or fail, or when someone else performs better than them, they can actually feel completely worthless. So we really have to de-emphasize the focus on the result, you know, the output, and embrace the idea of learning and growing. That's what we want for our kids.
That's wonderful. And we always tell parents too, we're a process-oriented educational philosophy, not a product-oriented. And it is so important to give children that space and time to do things without that pressure of performance and measurement consistently. So Dr. Eileen Kennedy-Moore, I want to ask you about another topic, which occurs, in non-pandemic times as well. But I think because our anxieties are all high, probably more so during this school year. So sometimes children come home and tell parents about something that happened at school that alarms parents. And this happens from the time children begin having language all the way through college, as we know. So with a heightened sense of parental protectionism due to the pandemic, how should parents respond to their children's stories of school happenings?
You know, when my kids were little, I went to a back to school night once, and the teacher had the most wonderful line because she said, "Let's make a deal. I won't believe everything that your child says happens at home if you won't believe everything that your child says happens at school." So children are not good reporters. They really aren't. And Michael Thompson has this wonderful line that of kids reporting, and it goes like this: "It all started when she kicked me back." So, they
Yes,
don't
they seem to leave that part out.
Yeah, exactly. There's more to the story there. So we, of course, we want to listen to our children, but we also want to ask, can I let this go? So I have a naturally patient disposition. I have a PhD, 6 years of graduate school. I've written 8 books about parenting and child development, including the great courses. And not every moment in my home would qualify as for a video on exemplary parenting. We're human. And the good thing is that children don't need perfection. You know, they need us to care and to try again, but they're not perfect, and neither are we, and that's absolutely okay. So the first thing that you want to ask yourself if your kid reports something after, it's like, is this the whole story? You might want to ask yourself, can I let it go? Especially during the pandemic, teachers are working really, really hard. And I've met most of your teachers at Princeton Montessori, and they are so dedicated, and they just really, really care about learning and about the children and about the community. So your kids are in very, very good hands. So, and if something was not exactly right, if they didn't use this word and they used that word, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. We can let things go. We can have that generosity of spirit. Now, of course, if something comes up repeatedly, or it's a bigger issue, or your child is very upset about it, then sure, you want to give the teacher a heads up. But we want to do this gently and compassionately. We could start with appreciation. Moms and teachers never get enough appreciation, so that you can never go wrong by saying in a very genuine way, "Thank you so much for this. My kid really enjoyed that," or "I really appreciate all the extra effort you're going to in whatever it is." Start there. Teachers are
Yes,
human.
I
They
think
like
if the
that.
teacher hasn't reached out about it, that's a good indicator that you may not have, the whole truth, and it
Yeah.
may not have been, as serious as you're thinking it might be.
Exactly. So that might be in the category of, can I let this go? If you do decide to raise an issue, treat the teacher as a professional. You know, that they have the training. And what I love working about working with Montessori teachers is they are such good observers. You know, whenever I talk about a kid with a Montessori, oh, I get such good data. We as parents see one aspect of our kids, but the teachers see another aspect, and that's really important information. So we want to get the teacher's perspective. We want to be curious about. So this is what Jeffrey said. I'm wondering what you're seeing. So asking for their input in that way is respectful, and it's going to get them involved in it and get us the resource of their observation skills. We definitely don't accuse. We just assume you don't have the whole story. And if it's something that you're feeling a little upset about, if it's a bigger issue than something that's just a quick one-liner or just a heads up, request a phone call. I say this with my teenagers all the time. You know, the electronic communication is stripped down. It doesn't have the it doesn't have the body language. It doesn't have the tone of voice or the facial expression. So it's easy to talk past each other. Never have an emotional conversation electronically. Let's talk by the phone.
I think that's so important. And in Montessori, we always say that if we had to boil our philosophy down to one word, it would be respect. And I think in a pandemic, I would add trust. You know, teachers, because we have such young children in our school, all the way from infant through middle school, but primarily middle school or infant through kindergarten, we're not just a teacher of a subject. We're really partnering with you to develop and parent your child, if we want to be honest, using that word parenting as a verb. And children spend more hours at school oftentimes than they do at home in their waking hours when they're going to bed at 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. And so, you know, I often tell parents when they come to me for advice on how to speak to a teacher about an upset, how would you speak to your parent partner? Would you, the second they walked in from work, say, I can't believe this happened, and how dare you? You had, you know, supervision of our child on Saturday while I was doing something else, and this is what they told me you did. You wouldn't. You would start by saying, hey, you know, I got to tell you, you know, our child said this. What happened? And you would assume that they've got the whole story and the real story. And I think that's so important for parents to just start with a question. You know, my child came home with this story. I'd love to hear what happened.
Right.
Or my child came home with this story. I'd love to hear your take on things. Obviously, I'm holding some worry about it, and I just love some of your time. That's exactly, you know, what I heard you say too. Instead of how dare you, speaking about it as though it's a definitive translation of exactly what happened, and letting your child know too. You know, you're not saying to your child, "Well, I'm going to email the teacher right now and straighten this out." You take their power away. So being able to talk to the child in a coaching manner and say, you know, did you speak up in the moment? What can you say tomorrow when you come to school? And then if you still need to go and email the teacher, do, but the child doesn't need to see you coming into the rescue to take over for them.
Right. Because if we take over, then you're saying, oh, honey, this is something you can't handle. Really? Really? Sometimes it is. Sometimes that's true, but not very often. I think it's also important to try to work things out with the teacher before bumping it up to administration.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also, especially in this time of pandemic, to be mindful of how much extra time you're asking for the teacher. Your teachers work very hard to plan their lessons and to be there with the kids. And they're so dedicated that they do those extra phone calls. I know I've heard them talking about, well, I'm going to call the parent and I want to let them know, or I'm going to shoot her an email or tell him about this. And sometimes it's just because they're excited about the kid did something wonderful. But that is extra time. And so again, it's just, as you said, it's about respect. It's about respect.
All clear for the lockdown. Thank you.
So, Dr. Kennedy-Moore, I want to ask you, what are some positive things parents can do to support their children's learning? Because clearly they do want to be involved. They do have worry about their doing well in school. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what they can proactively put their energy toward.
There is so much wonderful stuff that parents can do. And I think you're right. We want to channel this desire for our kids to learn and to support that in good ways. The first thing is feed their curiosity. So the experiences that you can share, go exploring, the books that you can read together, or even when your child asks a question, you say, I don't know, let's go look that up. Well, wow, who knew bats did that? Or whatever it is that they're doing. So I think that's probably the most important one, is just value curiosity, feed it as much as you can, give them those enriching experiences that allow them to explore the world and discover their interests. I mean, so my kids, all 4 of them are grown now, but it's just so interesting to see, what they latched onto and made theirs, because try this, let's try that. And each of them found things that they became passionate about. And some of them came through like different periods, like, one month it was ancient Egypt and the next month it was space. And, that's absolutely fine. That's how kids learn. Another thing that we've kind of already touched on is to express a positive attitude towards the teachers and schools. So when parents complain about, this teacher, whatever, you're really getting in the way of the kid connecting with the teacher and connecting with the learning. So bite your tongue, especially around the kids. If you have any criticism, they don't need to hear it. They don't need to be burdened by that. Also, you can also, Montessori really emphasizes modeling. So let them see you learning something, especially if you're not very good at it, at least to begin with. So a lot of times kids have the idea that I need to be instantly accomplished at something. But most things worth learning take time. So we let them see you struggling and even talk aloud and say, I tried this way and it didn't work. Or, well, I haven't mastered this, but I'm going to keep practicing. You can just kind of say that in their vicinity. So they embrace that learning process. You can also help them see their progress. That is very inspiring for kids. And parents, we are the repository of that whole developmental spectrum. I like to tell parents to be our kids' biased biographer. So tell them stories of times when they struggled and then triumphed. I remember when you were first learning to ride your bike and you fell and you fell and you fell, but now look at you zipping around. I remember when you were first learning to swim and you were afraid to put your face in the water, and now look at you, you're a fish. So the struggle followed by triumph stories helps kids keep motivated to learn. And finally, a fun thing is let them teach you. So this gives them the delicious sense of they get to be the expert. And again, it models the curiosity and is, tell me about that. Especially if it's something funny, like teaching tap dancing to dad. Okay, I'm making assumptions, and maybe your kid's dad is an amazing tap dancer. Mine, it would be hilarious. But let them see that, and let them see the playfulness and the willingness to learn, the valuing the fact that they know stuff.
Right. And in Montessori, that's one of the reasons we have multi-age classrooms, because we know the highest form of learning is teaching. And when we have to teach something, we know it is at a mastery level. If you can articulate it and show it and model it, you've really internalized it. So that's wonderful advice from a Montessorian.
So Michelle, I wonder if you could explain a little bit about the learning process. You were starting to talk about it a little bit earlier, but we know it's more complicated than, just have kids open their mouth and you dump the information in. So what can you tell us about the Montessori approach to learning that parents may not realize?
I think explaining Montessori and an elevator pitch is a challenge for all Montessorians because there's so many layers to it. But what I most want parents to remember is that learning is a marathon and not a sprint. And we're not just preparing test takers. We're actually developing human beings in the hope that they will become highly functioning adults who have joy and passion in what they do. They have meaningful relationships that are successful. and they're resilient enough to take what life throws at them. So that doesn't happen, in a way that is measurable by the time they're 7 or 9 or 12. Often the work we do doesn't truly pay off until they're in their 20s or 30s, and that that prefrontal cortex of executive functioning is fully formed. But children also, while they're doing this journey of learning, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to walk a straight line. Sometimes they're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Certainly during the pandemic, I know parents are worried about a little regression with learning skills, but it's okay. Everybody took a step back, and they've got their whole lives to become mathematical thinkers, readers, critical thinkers, creative individuals. And I think also just to let parents know that when we focus on performance and measurement, we create anxiety that gets internalized in children. What we want to do is create an environment where they feel safe to take a risk or make a mistake or speak up and guess at an answer that might not be right. And so in Montessori, we really try to create, if you will, this sort of laboratory or incubation where the children can all be together, safe and protected, to do that work that only they can do. And the best we can do as parents is to partner with the teachers and make sure that they have a rich environment, they have the support and love of the adults around them, and some really good modeling. Montessori teachers always look for what we call the teachable moment. Is there a way we can phrase something or suggest something or allow something to unfold without interfering so that the child learns something by that process? And we're very much about independence. So in a Montessori school, when a child comes and says, where do I find this? We don't answer right away. We'll ask them a question. Yesterday when you were in science class and everybody needed this item, do you remember where they went? Where would you think it would be in the class? And where are your personal things? And just guiding them to have that confidence in themselves to problem solve. That's really, I think, the gist of Montessori. And I hope it's why parents chose our school, that they know this independence and this problem solving and this sense of security and sense of well-being is central for children to become their best selves.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really wonderful. And I think you're absolutely right. We want our children to be fearless learners. So this independence, this allowing them to explore, the focus on process rather than product, all of that feeds into it. I think that kind of approach is also really important on the social and emotional side. So we tend to view academic and professional learning and success as one aspect and social and emotional as something completely separate. But in Montessori and in life, really, they're deeply intertwined. So that's very important. And also we have to recognize that on the social emotional front, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to have an argument. They're going to get upset about things. And that's okay because they are learning. What we really wish for our kids is many small frustrations and failures and struggles so that they can learn that, oh, I can get past this. That was hard. And then I got past this. And that's how they become more capable.
Well, that is great guidance because as parents, we can think it's our job to protect them from any kind of frustration or upset, when in reality, we're hoping they hit a few bumps in the road so they learn how to manage them.
Exactly. Those are the learning moments. Those are those teachable moments that we hope for. And a lot of it is, again, getting back to the theme of we don't solve it for them. When a child is learning math, you don't say to them, the answer is 4. It's 4. So well, what do they do with that? They might get that problem, but they don't know how to approach it. It's the same thing with social emotional struggles. You're not going to say it's 4. You're going to ask questions to help the child think it through, or what could they do, or how could you tell her, what words could you use, how do you think she would respond if you said that to her? And
so in a nutshell, looking at every opportunity with your child to say, how can I help them gain skill and independence in this moment? And if you ask yourself that question in every situation, you're likely to be parenting the Montessori way.
Right. And how can I help this child think through it? And with social emotional, the thing that fuels the development of children's friendships, from those toddler, love the one you're with friendships, to the deeper and more intimate and long lasting friendships of teenagers, is an increasing ability to understand someone else's perspective. So even if they're saying something with, like, the teacher told me I couldn't do the whatever, ask the question, what do you think was going on that would make the teacher want to say that? And you're starting to imagine someone else's perspective. This starts around age 4, but it takes a long time to develop. Even as adults, we're more empathic at 29 than we were at 19, or certainly than we were at 9. So that's important. And we have to respect the development and support it rather than push it. I don't know if you know this story, but there's an apocryphal story about Piaget, that when he came to the United States and would give these lectures about the stages of development, he said that invariably he would get what he called the American question, which was, oh, so these stages, that sounds really good. How do I get the kid to move faster through the stages? And the answer is we don't. Social, emotional, cognitive development, we can't rush it any more than we can make them become taller faster. We meet the child where they are and help them grow from there.
That's a great story. And it's interesting to hear we had an American parenting prototype even in that day. So Dr. Kennedy-Moore, I just want to thank you for joining me in this conversation about the parent-teacher partnership during a pandemic, and for giving parents authentically helpful things they can do to ensure their child is socially and emotionally healthy, and also moving forward academically as they hope for. And certainly we all need to work together in partnership on behalf of the children, and we need to do that work from a place of trust. Thank you so much for speaking on this topic today.
My pleasure, Michelle.